Have got a lot to unpack. We need to turn our attention to the games this weekend. We need to turn our attention to some unfortunate news out of College Station, what it means for Texas A&M, everything in between. And we also need to talk about some recruiting because this is a wild cycle in recruiting. If you look and if you've been keeping up with recruiting for quite some time, you'll know that it's always wild, but this year in particular, you look and so many guys have already committed. And yesterday, one of the leading voices in the recruiting industry tweets out decommitment season. You already know every fan in the nation thinks their team is about to get a flip from their rival and that all of their players are safe in their class. We need to unpack it all. As you guys come in here, hop in the chat. Let me know how you're doing on this Wednesday. Hit the like button as well. Also, if you're into vintage college football apparel, be sure to head over to homefieldapparel.com. They've got you covered for all the best college football fan wear. And while you're over there, be sure to use code ATTS15 for 15% off your first order. I think they have the best college football apparel in the game, and that's why I'm so proud to be working with them. But turning our attention to the weekend, there are so many big games we need to start covering as Chicken comes in here with a boomer sooner. Chicken, we're going to cover Iowa State versus Oklahoma because Oklahoma should win this game with ease, but Iowa State did kind of start finding an identity last week, so we'd be remiss if we didn't at least talk about the game. Richard's coming in here. Of course, we're going to kick this off talking about this Alabama game this weekend because I think it's interesting. Mississippi State historically has been a team where you know what you're getting with them. You're getting a high-powered offense. They're going to score a bunch of points. They're not going to run the football, and if they decide to play defense, that'll be news to everybody, at least under Mike Leach, and that's been the Mike Leach MO. And what's impressive about that is he's the one coach who you know is only going to throw the ball, but you still have to worry about Mike Leach beating you. Now, rest in peace, Mike Leach, one of the absolute great college football coaches we've ever had, someone who leaves a lasting legacy in the game. Mississippi State now transitions from Mike Leach to Zach Arnett, a defensive-minded head coach. They're running a 3-3-5 over there, and they're finding their way. If we look at the offensive side of this football, they have one of the leading SEC passers in Will Rogers, and he's had an up-and-down year. A big piece of that is he had a total offensive philosophy change, going from that Mike Leach air raid offense to a more pro-style offense. And up until this past weekend, we haven't seen Mississippi State's offense be that daunting offense that so many people in the nation thought they would be. But last weekend, that started to change. We saw Will Rogers throw for a whole bunch of yards, looking like the Will Rogers of old. We saw a wide receiver from Mississippi State get real active, go for over 250 yards. And now this Mississippi State offense is playing with some confidence. Now, they took the loss to South Carolina. However, what I do think is important is that at some level, Mississippi State started to find an identity. And if you've heard me talk about Alabama, if you've heard me talk about anybody, you'll know finding your identity is exactly where you need to be if you want to start moving forward. It's impossible to move forward if you don't know who you are. And Mississippi State may have just started to find that identity. Van comes in here, says, Roll Tide. Name says Texas is fixing to land the number one defensive end, number one offensive tackle, number two cornerback, and number two wide receiver. What's up, Ty? Hey, I saw Moore over there taking that visit. That would be a huge flip. Very talented prospect. Texas recruiting right now is going insane. Kyle Flood, we know what he does on that offensive line recruiting. Keeping Colin Simmons home was an absolute win. And I think that's been a major difference for the Texas Longhorns is if we look at the amount of players, the big name players, and especially the players at position of need, they're able to keep home. I think that's something that's really separating what Steve Sarkisian and previous coaches were able to do is the type of recruiting this staff is doing. Very impressive. But transitioning back to Mississippi State, Alabama, this is going to be a fascinating game because this is Jalen Milroe's first true road test of the season. That's another reason why I was so upset that he didn't get any time against USF. Now, once again, I've said this time and time again. I've heard several different reasons as to why Jalen Milroe did not play in that game. I'm not going to divulge them, but I've heard so many different reasons. That right there was problematic to me because Jalen Milroe not playing in the USF game really contributed to the offensive struggles we saw Alabama suffer in the first half against Ole Miss, because you're taking away snaps from a guy that needs all the experience he can get. You're taking away opportunities from a guy that has a real high ceiling, but you just need to let him go out there and develop. Now, the one good thing that the USF game did provide the Crimson Tide was a very clear understanding as to who the quarterback was. The one good thing that game did provide the Crimson Tide is it gave them an identity. For the first time this season, Alabama undoubtedly knew who they were, who their leader needed to be moving forward, especially with the offensive line struggling as much as it is. It's one of the worst offensive line and pressure rates in Power 5, if not the worst. There's a lot of work they need to do, though I must admit, the offensive line played a lot better against Mississippi or Ole Miss, and Ole Miss has actually been able to get to the quarterback this year. Coming into that Alabama game, Ole Miss had been able to generate 10 sacks on the year. That Alabama offensive line played their best game against Ole Miss, and we're hoping that can carry forward into Mississippi State, that can carry forward into Texas A&M. It's an offensive line that has some young pieces, but they have got to get it together if the offense is going to ever become the offense so many people think it has an opportunity of becoming. This weekend is going to be a big test. Jalen Milroe will be on the road for the first true road test of his career in 2023. And one thing we do know about Mississippi State, those cowbells are loud. And personally, I think it's awesome that Mississippi State is the game right before Texas A&M, because we know what a hostile environment Texas A&M is. We know that that's a place Alabama has struggled in the past with their great quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe needs that road test at Mississippi State before he heads to Kyle Field. I like that you're going to have those cowbells ringing, those cowbells clanging. You're going to have all those loud voices. I think that's great preparation for Texas A&M. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying look over Mississippi State. But I also think that there are paths to victory for Alabama in this Mississippi State game that will allow them to continue developing their offense and help them find success against Texas A&M. Let's hit a few comments. He says, a quarterback with a great deep ball and can take it 90. How is he not the clear starter? Just build the offense around both. 100% name. I think what it is it goes back to something Nick Saban said. They wanted a quarterback that would be able to get the ball out to their playmakers, because Alabama's wide receivers this year, I think they have a really solid room. When I was watching the All-22 film from several of the games, they're generating separation, and it's not just one guy. It's the wide receiving core as a whole right now is playing really high-level football, and they were wanting a guy that could spread it out. However, that comes with two problems. One, I'm not convinced that Buckner is a better passer than Jalen Milroe. He's certainly not a better athlete. He certainly doesn't have a better deep ball, but you can't convince me that Buckner is better in the short to intermediate game than Jalen Milroe. In fact, I'd take my chances with Jalen Milroe in the short to intermediate game. Two, Ty Simpson is a talented passer. I've heard word from people around the team that they think he might have the highest ceiling as a passer, but there are two problems. One, he's young. Two, there's no semblance of a consistent offensive line. And right now, the only guy out there that when you have no semblance of a consistent offensive line that can take advantage of those opportunities and still make a defense pay is Jalen Milroe. The other thing, name, is that there's no quarterback on this roster, even Ty Simpson, that's going to hit the deep ball at that clip. And one thing I did see, Jalen Milroe, guys, I know we've all, you've heard the talk that he's a one-read quarterback. I talked about this coming out of the Texas game, that they are not using him as a one-read quarterback this year. I talked about the first pass of the Texas game. I didn't show you a clip of it because obviously I'd get demonetized at that point, but I did explain it to you, where they dropped back and had Jalen Milroe go from the first read to the second read, and then he found Amari Niblack. So the guy is getting it together. He is actually still being asked to read, and he looks more comfortable the more you ask him to do it. Who knew that you just needed to let him have the experiences? Now, are there going to be bad plays? Sure. That first interception in Ole Miss, or the only interception, that was a tough play. Right. Everybody can admit that. We can all hop on the train. That was a tough play. But when you have a brand new quarterback like Jalen Milroe, who's still developing, but has a very, very, very high ceiling, you need to let some of those mistakes happen. And I was very happy to see Nick Saban and the coaching staff watch him throw that interception and just clap and have him come over to the sideline and say, all good, man, all good. Learn in the fire, go back out there next time, make him pay. Because he came back out after halftime with the understanding that one mistake isn't going to define me as a starting quarterback because I have been named the guy. He wasn't as worried about looking over his shoulder, which is one of the reasons why I wanted Alabama to name a starting quarterback far before this point. Because none of these guys need to be looking over their shoulder thinking, if I mess up, I'm going to get the job taken from me. Because then they're all going to be going out there trying to force plays instead of allowing plays to happen within the scheme. We saw Jalen Milroe in that second half look comfortable in the offense. But it's not just Jalen Milroe. Because I said after the Texas game, if you're asking me to rank problems in that Texas game, if you give me 3, right? And you have to make me rank which is the biggest problem to the least. Offensive coordinator, offensive line, Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe would have been the least problematic of that list. Offensive coordinator, offensive play calling against Texas, which part of that is in response to the Texas defense forcing your hand. So hats off there. I don't want to oversimplify this and sounds like no part of that game plan was affected by the Texas defense. Obviously it was. That Texas defense is for real, and it forced Tommy Rees's hand. But the offensive line hasn't been good. And it's kind of hard to blame a young quarterback when the offensive line isn't good because that offensive line had Bryce running for his life. Jalen Milroe is now a first-time starter. Now we're starting to see Tommy Rees is becoming comfortable with what Jalen Milroe can do. And this is important because, guys, Tommy Rees is only a few years older than myself, which is wild to think about. I'm 28 years old. Tommy Rees is 31. So he is still learning as well. That might not be comforting news to some Alabama fans, but it has become very apparent to me that he is still learning. Now, take that as you will. Some people might hear that and say, that's terrible. More people might hear that and say, oh, so we have a guy that Nick Saban already thinks is an intriguing offensive mind, and there's a lot for him still to learn. That could be good, no matter how you look at it, right? But let's focus on this game right here. Because up until this past week, we have not seen Mississippi State come alive. And if Mississippi State was still sleepwalking in their offense because it's a total scheme change, Alabama could rout this Mississippi State team. But last week, that offense came alive. Will Rogers just shy of 500 yards. They had that slot wide receiver, Griffin, go just shy of 300 yards. I think he came in at 256. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch because when I watched how they're getting him active, they're attacking that slot cornerback. So Malachi Moore, someone who, if you tuned into the Bama Standard last night, the final whistle, we gave with Daquan Minzy our secondary MVP grades. Absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to him, by the way. It was an unbelievable experience getting to do a live show with someone who I grew up watching dominate college football. Unbelievable. But we all were in agreement. The Alabama secondary has had several guys playing well. But Malachi Moore right now, ladies and gentlemen, looks like he went back to freshman year Malachi Moore, but with all of the understanding of the defense that he's accrued since that freshman year. It really paints the picture that that back injury was a major catalyst as to why we didn't see that freshman year Malachi Moore, because this year, now that he is able to be fully healthy, we're seeing a Malachi Moore who's inspired, who's playing fast, who's playing smart, and he is being a major leader in this defense. This week, they're going to test him. And ladies and gentlemen, I feel very confident about his ability to answer the call, but I'm also very excited to see the test play out. Because Griffin is a very talented wide receiver. He's got speed. He was absolutely killing the South Carolina secondary. Now, the South Carolina secondary is not the Alabama secondary. This Alabama secondary is for real now. They are for real. You look at how they're grading right now. I mean, Kool-Aid McKinstry is having himself a year. Terry and Arnold is having a coming out party every single week, shutting down a side of the field. And yes, he might give up a reception, but he's getting turnovers, passes defended, and he's not out of position. That's the thing that I like. I'm fine if you get a ball completed on you, but were you in position? Were you in phase? If the answer is yes, okay, sometimes that'll happen. Caleb Downs, true freshman, still learning. I think he had his best game against Ole Miss by far. By far. He played a really good game against Ole Miss. And if you were someone who came here and tuned in to Through the Haze, you will know I talked about how I thought Lane Kiffin would attack Caleb Downs because Steve Sarkisian attacked Caleb Downs. And I told you all that I thought that practice that Caleb Downs got against that Sark offense would come back and do wonders against this Ole Miss team. At a certain level, it did. At a certain level, it did. That test that Caleb Downs had faced really came back and was positive experience here, which is one of the reasons why I'm so big on those early season matchups. Alabama's going to have an opportunity against a defense that now runs a 3-3-5. So in theory, if you can generate the running lanes, you're going to get those safeties to creep forward. Why I like that is because if those safeties start creeping forward, Isaiah Bond, Jalen Hale, Burton, Brooks, Benson, they're going to have a field day. And right now, Jalen Milroe has the third highest passer rating in all of college football on the deep ball. His deep ball is elite. There's no arguing that. His deep ball is elite. He is hitting it at a really high rate. Like uncannily so, actually. It's actually really cool from a nerd perspective, right? Like it's awesome. So the keys for Alabama in this game. One, if we're looking at the offense, the offensive line has got to continue showing up and dominating because next week you're playing an opponent that has got more 5-star defensive linemen that you can shake a stick at. And they're going to be hungry because they always play Alabama fairly well, it seems. Your offensive line has got to answer the call every opportunity they get to go lace up. It starts this weekend against Mississippi State. Give Jalen Milroe the time. He will make the throws. Allow your running back lanes to develop. Jace, Roy Dell, Jam, Haynes, they will take over. The running back room at Alabama is there. The offensive line has got to answer the call. They played their best game against Ole Miss. The wide receivers, I expect them to do their thing. They have been awesome. They're getting separation. There are now deep threats on this wide receiving core that they didn't have last year. I mean, Isaiah Bond, ladies and gentlemen, looks like he's poised to take a next step. He is ready. He is hungry. And at that slot wide receiver position, he is a mismatch. And then the tight ends. I think Alabama has got one of the more intriguing tight end rooms in the country with Amari Niblack, with Danny Lewis, with CJ Dippre, and the way they utilize Oots both as a tight end and as an H-back. I like the room. I think if you base out of 12 personnel, you have tight ends that have stylistic differences, and you can make a defense really pay. Let's flip the script and talk about this Alabama defense against this Mississippi State offense. Mississippi State came alive last weekend. And I understand there is an argument to be made that they came alive against a bad South Carolina defense and it's a one-off. And if you present me that argument, I have nothing to counter it except this. And I do think it is an interesting counter to note. Even though the offense for Mississippi State has not found their stride through the vast majority of this year, they did so last week. And the reason why that's compelling to me is we're not talking about a brand new quarterback. We're not talking about a quarterback that's been up and down all around. We're not talking about a quarterback who you said, oh, you know, in 3 drives in that game, he really put it together. And if you could get those 3 drives of that quarterback, you'd have a dude. We're talking about Will Rogers. We're talking about someone who's thrown for so many yards in the SEC. We're talking about a veteran quarterback who had an offense change from under him where they were running an air raid to a pro style. He threw for almost 500 yards last week. Now, I absolutely think that this Alabama secondary is better than that South Carolina secondary, but I also think it would be foolhardy for us not to at least acknowledge there is a possibility that the Mississippi State offense has finally found a rhythm. Now, what do I think that means against this Alabama defense? Unfortunately for Mississippi State, I don't think finding a rhythm one game before you play this Alabama defense is going to be a winning strategy. I think Alabama's offense looks like they might be starting to find their own rhythm as well. But Alabama's defense this year is playing stingy. If we look at that front seven, they're really starting to come alive. They're really starting to figure it out. Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell got active against Ole Miss, and their timing looks like it's figured out. It looks like it was starting to get figured out against USF as that game progressed, and it looked like it carried over right where they left off from USF against Ole Miss. I hope to see the same against this Mississippi State offensive front. If we look at the linebackers, Deontay Lawson goes down. That is a hit. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But here is the positive I will offer you. Alabama's linebacker room this year is as good as I can remember. Not maybe in terms of having two guys that you look at and you're like, man, that's Ruben. But in terms of depth, there are so many good players there. Kendrick Blackshire showed up, and I actually think he could be an interesting piece in this game. Campbell is an interesting linebacker because he has coverage ability. If you remember before the season started, I was really high on the duo of Campbell and Lawson because I thought that the coverage ability those two granted your defense is absolutely insane. Well, I watched Kendrick Blackshire fully healthy, and let me tell you what, he is here to make a name for himself. I think the inside linebacker room is going to be a room that has a lot of names in it, and I think that they are going to be able to hit the ground running, but we do need to also acknowledge Deontay Lawson is a hit. Going to be exciting to see how they navigate that. Up front, one of the things that I really noticed that stood out to me, and it stood out to me early in the year, whenever I was talking to Texas Homer as he was putting together his Alabama versus Texas preview, we kept looking at the roster and talking about the things that stood out to us. And instantly moving Jaheim Otis to defensive end allows for Alabama to maximize that defensive front because they had a Boygby. They knew what he did last season. We're still waiting for a Boygby to pick it up like he had last season. Boygby, if you wanted a game to do it, my brother, this would be the one. We know how talented you are. You pick up the way you left off last season before the unfortunate injury, this Alabama defense is going to be clicking on another level because you're just going to provide another real serious threat up front. But a name has stepped up that Alabama fans need to be very happy about because before this year, the big question was, okay, well, you have Jaheim Otis, but who else do you have on the interior that's really going to be that guy that you anchor? Tim Smith is up and down. He's not really that guy that you look at that you're like, okay, there's Otis, but who else? In comes Tim Keenan. And Tim Keenan had a day against Ole Miss. Sliding Jaheim Otis out to defensive end allows you to play a guy that is still at a defensive line size. Jaheim Otis is still built like an interior defensive lineman. He is just so athletically gifted. They slide him out to defensive end because he has that athleticism. Put Tim Keenan on the interior, and now your defensive front has power. It's got nastiness, and they're starting to come alive. That really stood out to me. And I think this is a game where that's really going to continue being a major positive for the Crimson Tide. The interior presence that Tim Keenan is providing right now, it's impressive. And Jaheim Otis, I can't wait to see him continue developing. Guys, this was a guy that came in and lost over 100 pounds in a year. His work ethic is unmatched, and his athletic ability matches his work ethic, which is what makes him so scary. So the front for Alabama, I think, is really coming together, and then we talk about this secondary. If there's one area I'm interested in seeing is Jalen Key. I don't know if he's fully healthy right now. I think he might still be a little bit banged up from that injury he sustained earlier in the season because right now he looks a step off, and he didn't look a step off the first few games. So I think he's still nursing a little bit of an injury. This is my little conspiracy theory. And if you're wondering, oh, well, if he's still a little banged up, why is he out there? Well, remember, Devontae Smith got banged up before the season started, and he was a guy that was really turning heads at that safety position. So Alabama, Mississippi State, I'm going to predict Alabama to score 35 points, Mississippi State to have 10. Alabama gets a big win in Mississippi State before Texas A&M, and hopefully that offense continues rolling. That defense is great. Let's hit some comments, guys. I'm sorry I really went in deep there and didn't hit comments for a long time. That's my fault. Van says, agreed. It was clear from the start that Milroe had the best skill set. How do you not? I have no idea. Milroe's a third-year guy who can't make reads and consistently stares down receivers. That's why he didn't play against USF. They're still coaching around what he can't see out there. He's making reads, man. If you go and watch, they're asking him to make reads. Now, it's something that needs to develop, Jim, you're not wrong, but I will say this. He needs to be given the opportunity because I'll ask you this question, Jim. Did you see an Alabama quarterback that you have more faith in? Because I didn't. Well, one good half of football caused Milroe to get careless with the football. That's what to watch for. That's a fair question. This is a very fair question. I don't know the answer to that. I assume no, because I don't know that Milroe is just in a position to be careless with the ball, right? Because there's still that fear of this quarterback competition. Now, I know he had the bad interception, but I also think that that's just a product of inexperience. They're certainly asking him to make more reads, and we have to understand he's never been asked to do something like this until he got here. There are going to be some lumps, but I think you're well placed in both of your comments. This one right here, and then this one, right? Like there are deficiencies. There's no way that you can go around that, but I do think he offers you the best ability to win. But I think both of your comments are certainly well placed. PG in the house. Glad you could make it. I'm just happy to see the whole team take baby steps towards building something. I will take what I can get after the previous 2 weeks, no doubt. We would be better off if Milroe was running the freshman playbook of Jalen Hurts, give him an easy read on the near outside third, and if it's not there, run it in the stand, throw it in the stands or run. I completely agree with that, Hacker. Like, don't get me wrong, Jim and Hacker. When I'm saying what they're asking of Milroe, that's not necessarily what I would be doing, but I'm also not an offensive coordinator who Alabama would ever even dream of hiring, right? Like, my local YMCA would kick me out. So that's neither here nor there. But I do agree, right? Like right now, and this goes back to what you said, Jim, because you're not wrong. I think one of the things right now is Milroe is being asked to do so much learning so quick that mistakes are going to happen. And the thing that worries me is if Alabama continues this quarterback carousel, they're going to kill the confidence of every single quarterback on that roster so that all of them are shells of themselves. And so that's why at this point, you're almost in a position where you've already played this game. It didn't work because USF almost caught you. Pick a guy and go, because the quarterback carousel, that's going to really damage the team long term. And you heard people even theorizing how much damage it did against USF. Luckily, they responded very well. But yeah, no doubt, Hacker, Jim, I think you're both absolutely onto something. Anthony says, Ty, if Milroe's continued struggling with the passing, how long before you guys bring in Simpson because he's a more consistent passer, it seems, based on both their tapes out of high school? Anthony, I don't. And the reason is simple. Unless it gets really bad. Like, unless it's inexcusable, where it's just like there's nothing you can do here. At that point, you make a change. But until that point, I don't know that you do. And the reason is what I just said. Quarterbacks need to understand and teams need to understand this guy is our leader, right? Like quarterbacks will grow in an offense once they understand it is their offense. If you continue this quarterback carousel, will he, won't he, I don't know, it's into week 6. I mean, at a certain point, you're just telling everybody, not only do we not know our identity, but we're not committed to finding an identity because we're not committed to any one guy unless it's egregious. Right? In which case, then you do it. Oh, well, Jim, I never said you did. I was just asking if you thought that there was someone better. Like, I was just genuinely curious. Jim says, I never said we had someone better, but we can't pretend he's more developed than he is. When you're coaching to limit quarterback turnovers, but I don't think they are coaching to limit quarterback turnovers right now, Jim. Because if you catch the all 22s, they're not simplifying things for Milroe. They're still asking him to make progression-based reads. Now, I'd like to see a bit more of the scaling back, a bit more of the quick passing, bit more of that classic Jalen Hurts freshman year stuff. But right now, they're still asking the same of the offense. There's actually a really good video by, I think it's Brian on YouTube. I forget the YouTube channel. He breaks it down, how often in this past game Milroe is making reads. For instance, on the big play on third down, wherever Alabama was backed up into the red zone, he got it to CJ Dippre. That was like his third read. So they're still asking him to go from here to here to here. I'd like them to switch it up. But no doubt, no. I wasn't operating under the assumption, Jim, that you were saying there is a better option. I was just genuinely curious if you thought like Ty Simpson gave them it was a question of curiosity. I think it's more progression going through their reads. Yeah, he's just got to learn. He's just got to be allowed the opportunity to learn. You only get to see one defense every week in practice. He needs to be allowed the opportunity to learn in live action. But that's Texas. That's Mississippi State, Alabama. We're going to move forward to Texas A&M because Texas A&M, bad news out of College Station, ladies and gentlemen. Connor Weigman reportedly, per Billy Lucci, who does great work for Texas A&M, he's reporting that he is going to have a season-ending injury coming off of that Auburn game. Now, if you watch the Auburn game, he sustained a lower leg injury that did not look good. Pretty obvious pain as he was not able to put much weight on it. And now reports coming out that he is set to miss the season. So what does this mean for Texas A&M? Well, Max Johnson will be the guy. Now, one cool thing that we did see in that Auburn game is Johnson threw a touchdown to his younger brother, which is really cool, right? How many times do we get to see that in college football where big bro throws a touchdown to little bro? But this is going to be interesting to see what Texas A&M does. Because right now, Johnson took over that game and he was wheeling and dealing for the Aggies, right? Like he was going out there trying to make plays for his team. He was going out there trying to show them like, hey, even though I wasn't named the starter, I'm going to do everything I can for you guys. And of that, I commend him. But what does this offense look like long-term? And this goes into something with Texas A&M. They have had a really unfortunate streak of injuries on this offense, time and time again, to key players. If we go back last year, you're looking at a situation where Anais Smith went down. Before that, I mean, they've sustained so many injuries. Even this year, Donovan Green, their tight end, goes down. Now Max Weigman goes down. Super unfortunate luck for Jimbo Fisher. Hopefully Weigman is able to recover. Jim says I'd rather face Weigman than Max. I agree, Jim. I completely agree. Max had a good showing against Auburn. I certainly commend him for it. But Max Johnson is a quarterback that, I mean, maybe he's grown. Maybe he's grown. I'm certainly willing to be wrong here, right? I'm always willing to be wrong if it means that a player did well. I'm always happy being wrong in that aspect. But we've seen the Max Johnson movie before. We know who Max Johnson is a quarterback, and Weigman is a guy that he's got a high ceiling. He's got a high ceiling. That kid could be very good. And I was really excited to see him, especially with this offense, especially as hopefully they were trying to find some sort of identity. And Chris, I know I saw your comment. Kind of feel like Saban should have hired Petrino. Don't hate me, Ty. Negative ghostwriter. Negative ghostwriter. Look, Tommy Rees has been puzzling at times this year, Chris. But the one thing I will say is he's young, and I still think that once he figures it out, it'll be good. Now, I reserve the right to absolutely throw my computer against the wall by the end of the year if it doesn't work out like that. But we're not there yet. We're steadily approaching there. We're not there yet. I agree, though, Jim. I would absolutely rather be in a position. Oh, you said you'd rather face Weigman than Max. Look, I think Weigman has a higher ceiling. I think I might rather face Max than Weigman, but I do get this is why I said yesterday, streaming with dyslexia is hard. I do understand this argument, though. I do understand the notion of rather facing the young guy, even if I think Weigman has a higher ceiling, Jim, if you come to me and say, yes, that's all well and good, but Max Johnson, he played well against Auburn, which I do agree. And then you say he's seen SEC defenses, he's seen more college football, he's a more battle-tested guy. I have no argument for you there. I think Weigman has a higher ceiling. I think that the offense is really formulated for him within it. But I completely understand the notion of saying Max Johnson is an experienced quarterback. He played well, and he's got a lot of weapons out there now, right? Like Reuben Owens is a very talented back. Their running game needs to continue progressing. But from a wide receiver perspective, he's got a lot of dudes out there. Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, Noah Thomas, then their tight ends out there, Johnson. There's a lot of weapons in that offense. The defense is something I'm interested in seeing how it comes together. I apologize, Jim. My dyslexia got the better of me right there. Even though I think I'd rather face Max, I completely understand the argument of saying I'd rather face Weigman, because he's an experience. I don't think I think that's a completely logical take. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Especially off of the heels of what we just saw. He's running that a few people can run like them. He has a great second half. Yeah, Jim, I think this is a great comment as well. It's part of the reason why I took the time to talk about Reese's age, right? Where he's 31. He's 3 years older than me as I sit here, which is wild to me. That someone 3 years older than I am, right? We would have been in high school at the same time. Crazy. Is running the Alabama offense. That's wild. But Jim, I think this is such a good comment that people need to understand. If I could pin it up here and leave it up here as like a perma comment above me, I would. Because he's running a system made for Alabama by Kiffin and Sark. They gave Saban an offense that he could transition and use, because Alabama was in a position where they kept recycling offensive coordinators. And you're not putting your players in a position to be successful if every 2 years they have to learn a brand spanking new offense. That's going to be real hard to remain successful while every 2 years you have to completely start from a brand new offense. So he's working with an offense that he might not be the most comfortable with off the rip, and he's still learning. He's already a young guy learning, developing, and now he's in a brand new situation. I think that's a great point. I really like that point. Anthony says, Ty, when it comes to Milroe, though it seems like he's great with the deep passes, but when he gets to the short and immediate stuff underneath, he completely misses the boat. He's getting better, but it's one of those things, Anthony. He just needs time. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's Bryce Young, because he's not. But, man, they just need to give him the opportunity. Like, let him learn. Let him go out there. Let him make those throws. But at the same time, Tommy, you know you have a young quarterback. Help him in the process. Give him those easy throws to get his confidence up, to make him in with the timing with his receivers. Unleash it. So yeah, big loss for Texas A&M. Connor Weigman, a guy that was going to hoping to have a big year for them. Very talented, former 5-star out the state of Texas. And now they're going to have to go with their backup quarterback, Max Johnson, who once again, been an SEC guy, an experienced guy in college football, someone they at least feel confident in his ability to come in there and run the offense. And it's a very talented offense. They've got a lot of pieces that can make you pay. Alabama plays them not this weekend, but next weekend. So if you are an Alabama fan, you need to be watching Texas A&M this weekend to see what they do, how they come out, how they look. Let's move on to Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Now, this is a game Oklahoma should come in, should rout them, right? No doubt about it. OU is in a position where they have a better offense. They have a better defense than Iowa State. Iowa State has been all over the place all year. However, much like Mississippi State, Iowa State actually found some semblance of an offense last week against Oklahoma State. And because of that, I do feel like we would not be doing our jobs here if we did not at least discuss this game. Because much like Mississippi State, if they hadn't have had that game last week, Iowa State, I'd be in a position where I would think OU would just absolutely rout them. There's no reason for me to talk about the game. And even though I still feel like OU is going to rout them, I do feel like now there is a reason to talk about the game because Iowa State actually showed up. And now we have something to talk about. So let's start with the Oklahoma offense versus Iowa State's defense. And Iowa State's defense it's the Iowa State defense. It's not the Iowa State defense of old, but it is Iowa State. Right now, at the point where they allowed Iowa 20 points, that kind of gives you an inclination that this is not that former Campbell defense where you looked at it and you were like, my goodness, he's out there with 2- and 3-star guys and he has a top 15 defense. That's not the case. But Oklahoma does have something that has got to get together. It's the one part of their offense that just isn't clicking right now, and the rest of their offense is clicking quite well, really well. Their offense is doing very well. Wide receiver play there is much better than I think a lot of people anticipated. Even those that were optimistic about the OU wide receiver room, Andrell Anthony has came in there and proved he is a dude. The Oklahoma rushing attack has got to get it together. I talk about this all the time when I talk about LSU, where when my only knock for LSU's offense is that they do not have a running back that they can just turn to and say, hey, you go do your thing. They're still trying to figure that out. And even though LSU has Jaden Daniels is a quarterback who is just lighting it up right now. I think he went for 88% against Mississippi State, which is unbelievable. I still maintain that LSU needs to develop that rushing attack to unlock their offense in its entirety. And I feel the same way about the Oklahoma Sooners. When I watch this offense, Gabriel is dialed in. But you want to know how you can make Gabriel even better? Take a little pressure off of him. Just for the love of all things holy. Take a little pressure off of him. There are certain things I've seen with the Oklahoma running game right now that stick out, right? Stink, he addresses one of them. I think a lot of the running game problems are because of inconsistent offensive line play. Offensive line play has been a little up and down for Oklahoma. But another thing, one of the things I noticed against Cincinnati, and I haven't finished completely doing my rewatch of Cincinnati. I think I ended right before halftime. No, at halftime. I ended at halftime. And already I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes right before OU goes into half. I have 5 notes of times where their running backs get the ball and it's a pull situation where either the guard or the tackle is pulling, and the running backs do not wait for the guards or the tackles. They just say, I don't need them. I'm going to barrel into the hole where there is no offensive line protection. I don't know why they're doing that, but right now, that's one thing I've noticed. The Oklahoma running backs are not waiting for the blocks to develop. They're just straight up attacking the hole, which isn't a problem if it's just a straight north-south run where you just want to hand that running back the ball and he hammer. But it almost looks like right now, all of the Oklahoma running backs are trying to prove they are the guy, right? It almost looks like every single time they want to run so hard that they break off that home run type play because they are talented. Walker's a talented cat. Marcus Major's a talented dude. But they have got to understand that you've got to let those blocks develop and then attack the hole thereafter. When you see it happen, it goes and it works. But there were far too many times, like I said, and I easily could have missed some because in different plays, I was watching the offensive line, I was watching this. But in the first half alone, I counted 5 times where on a pull type run where the running backs needed to wait for either the tight end, the guard, or the tackle to set up the block, the running back was hitting the hole either at the exact same time as the blocker or right before the blocker. And there were so many times where the blocker never even really had an opportunity to initiate contact because they'd get there at the same time and he couldn't really do anything about it. So the good news there, that's an easy problem to fix. That's a very easy problem to fix. If you're ranking problems in your running back room, that's one where DeMarco Murray and film, I have no doubt in my mind. It's been said this week. I have no doubt. I would bet, well, I wouldn't bet a lot because I'm not a gambler, but I would bet you this simple remote right here, right? Yours for the cost of one bad bet with me right now. The DeMarco Murray and film session this week just pointed and said, hey guys, take a step back and let that develop. Jay and I were talking about this, and he told me, he's like, hey, Kennedy Brooks was so good at Oklahoma because he was so patient behind the line at letting things set up. And I get it. There's different styles of running back. If I go back to Alabama, Najee Harris was as fun of a running back to watch in college as any, right? As any I've ever seen. And granted, one of my favorite players is Sean Alexander, ever. That guy made me love college football in a way that was just different. But you saw Najee so many times, and this is a dude who's 225 pounds of pure muscle, 6'2", would just be running over people in the SEC. He would get the ball, and he would almost walk his first 3 steps, just da. And then he'd be watching and he would just dart. He was so much fun. I'm not advocating that the Oklahoma running backs do that. Be you, but you've got to let those blocks develop. And that was a major issue I kept seeing against Cincinnati, was just that the running backs were hitting the hole too quickly. And that's an easy problem to fix. Like out of all the things that could be wrong with your running back room, that's a nice issue to have because it is correctable. It is, in theory, one of the easier things to fix. Let's hit some comments real quick. Ty, I wish all about our offense would realize what you just said about offensive coordinator turnover. They think we would be better without Lebby. And no, look, it's not just Lebby right now. It's not just Lebby. I know Lebby, like Reese, is young. He's learning. And one thing people need to understand, Stink, I'm going to raise you one. What did Lebby just have the benefit of? And I'm not saying this is a shot at Lebby. It is just being real. It's just being real. He just had the benefit of coming from a situation where, yes, Lebby was the play caller. He was the offensive coordinator, but he had Lane. So if he did something that was like, okay, well, why are we doing this? Lane would come over there and be like, nah, this right here. Because Lane is a wizard. Like, genuinely, that dude is a wizard at offense in college football. There are certain offensive minds in college football, guys. If they did a 3-day seminar, I would be there all 3 days. Like, you couldn't get me to leave. Lane Kiffin is one of them. Steve Sarkisian is another. Really enamored by the Sean Lewis offense. Leach would have been one of those guys, right? Like, there are certain offenses that if they do a presentation, I would be there. Lebby came from him. And Lebby's a brilliant guy. But he is still learning. And I think that's one thing that needs to be understood. But two, the offense as a whole has had opportunities and just not necessarily been able to capitalize, and not frequently, because the offense for OU right now is in a really good position. It's in a really good position. But I think it just kind of goes back to if they're able to establish that running back room, it's going to be great. Stink, my man, you did not have to, but thank you so much with the $50 donation. Stink, you don't know how much that means, man. Thank you very, very much for being here. Just your support, you showing up in the chat and contributing with the football discussion, that's more than enough. Thank you so, so much for the donation. He says, I agree with that 100%. The Oklahoma offense is going to be fine. Jeff Lebby is going to be fine. There's a reason why so many other guys in college football looked at OU. Remember, Nick Saban tried to get him in for an interview. He was on the list of coaches Saban wanted to interview. It's because, one, what offense does Saban run? An offshoot of that Kiffin offense. It'd have been so easy for them to look at Lebby and be like, you there, come over here. You're going to be handed a playbook that you're very familiar with. Like, you know the terminology. You know everything. He's a good mind. He's a brilliant mind at the offensive level of football. He's young. He needs to be given his time, and it's his first time without a guy like Kiffin behind him. So, yeah, he's going to be perfectly fine. Stubby says, Oklahoma will be fine. The only people feeling anxious among the situation aren't Sooner fans. The defense is music to our ears, and the offense has potential if they get out of their own way. I completely agree with this, Stubby. And that's why I say when I bring up I'm quote-unquote concerned about the Oklahoma running game, understand concerned is as strong of a word as I could possibly use. Because I'm not sitting here saying I worry about Oklahoma's offense. No, it's fool's gold. No, the Oklahoma offense is what you see it as. But I also acknowledge it could be better. It could be more sure of itself with the presence of that running game. That's, I think, my position of looking at this. William says, I'm trusting the coaching staff has assessed the running back room and put the system in place to fit those guys. They just need to perfect it. Yeah, no doubt. Look, you got DeMarco. Your coaching staff has earned the benefit of the doubt time and time again. So we'll see. Anthony says, Ty, question about Jeff Lebby. Do you think it would have benefited him to go maybe a Sarkisian or Lincoln Riley to learn from another scheme as an analyst before becoming a coordinator at Oklahoma? Look, I think that it would benefit anybody from going and learning from a Lincoln Riley, a Lane Kiffin, a Steve Sarkisian. But the reason why I'm going to say no to this, Anthony, is because he just came from a Lane Kiffin. And he had come from Bryle's system before. So he's been under top offensive minds in college football before. There's no doubt that inundating yourself with all of these brilliant offensive minds is a positive. So at some level, the answer to your question is it would have been a great experience for him to be around Sark, to be around Riley, and pick up all of these little nuggets. But at the end of the day, the time was then. Right? He's a guy that was going to get tabbed as an offensive coordinator sooner or later. and it was Oklahoma that tabbed him. Is our punter. I haven't checked out your punter very much, to be honest. Just hope the coaches pick RBs and let them go to work. Yeah, I have no doubt, T. I have no doubt. Am I late for Texas A&M's huge loss? We kind of just talked about that, Mark, but my brother, you probably already know what it is. It's the Max Johnson situation where he's now the starting quarterback, and Connor Weigman reportedly out for the season. Awful to hear for Weigman, former 5-star, really talented kid, very talented pieces on that Texas A&M offense, but now Max Johnson looks to be the guy. That's pretty much the discussion we had. If you haven't heard of Galway Girl, maybe you've heard of the Thunderhead Road, and I tell you every time we're going to go. Stubby, I haven't heard of that, but I'm also just like, I don't know, if it comes to anything like movies or anything like that, TV shows, I'm always so far out of the loop just because, like, I don't know. I'm the worst about all of that. You should see the way my wife is just so disappointed in me all the time. It's a weight-bearing bone that broke, apparently. Yeah. Talking about the Weigman. That's awful, man. Riley, Sark, and Kiffin can't be replicated. People need to understand how rare they're at. 100%, Jim. That's why there's only a few names, right? Like, I know a lot of offensive coordinators I like in college football. I know a lot of offensive coordinators that are good. But, man, there are some that's just like, what you do is so dangerous that, like, you got to be on your P's and Q's if you're playing them. 100%. Like Alabama, right? If you're going to play Steve Sarkisian, you better come with it because he's going to make you pay. So be disciplined. And in fairness, I thought Alabama's defense gave them every opportunity in that game. The offense was both hemmed up by that Texas defensive front and trying to figure themselves out, and Texas is a very good team. I saw a comment I wanted to hit. Boom to the Sooner. Is OU a dark horse playoff team? Boom, it's hard to tell right now. And let me explain this, because college football is all over the place right now. And I don't know who Oklahoma is. Now, understand when I say I don't know who Oklahoma is, we need to provide some context and nuance to that statement. I know Oklahoma is an improved football team from last year. I think if you've been watching, that's easy to tell. Just the defense playing so much more sure of themselves. And Danny Stutzman, my God, that guy's going to be up for the butt kiss. We've talked about that time and time again. I think in the Big 12, you're looking at Jalen Ford and Stutz being up for the butt kiss. Anthony Hill will be up for that award at some point. He's just not having the snaps as the other guys right now, but Anthony Hill's production relative to snaps is absolutely nutty. But I think out of the Big 12, you're looking at Jalen Ford and Stutz going up for that butt kiss award. Neither here nor there. But it's obvious that Oklahoma is an improved team. The defense is playing with so much more confidence, so much more understanding, and that's half the battle, right? Getting in the guys in that defensive front, which you got some out the transfer portal that are helping. You got some from recruiting that are helping. David Stone's going to be a major get. Nigel Smith, major addition. You're building that up. But understanding the defense, understanding your assignment, that's half the battle. And Oklahoma looks to be at that stage right now where they're understanding the Brent Venables defense. Now, offensively, like I just said, the only thing that I need to see from Oklahoma's offense right now, it's the same thing I talk about with LSU. So this is not a one-off to Oklahoma. I just need to see the running game come together. And I know you have talented running backs. I watched Barnes and Sawchuk against Florida State, so I know when it's clicking, those cats are dangerous. I fully acknowledge that, no debate from me, but we haven't seen it click in 2023. And if week one, I'm here, right? I'm here for the argument of, oh, well, it'll come. But we just need to see it. I don't doubt that it'll be there. I've seen it be there. I like Marcus Major. I really like Tawi Walker. I like his story. Right? He's a really cool guy because if you listen to the coaches that have been around him, he took some time off of football, but everywhere he's gone, the thing that stood out to me is they talk about his work ethic and they say he is the hardest worker. You can't replicate that. Tawi Walker is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I love how they're getting him implemented in the passing game. But you do need that running game to alleviate some of the pressure on Dylan Gabriel. What did I ask for Oklahoma this season? As my dog is upset at something and I have no idea what. One of the things I needed to see from Oklahoma this season was that off-speed pitch. I know Oklahoma can score in an instant, but I need to see you be able to kill 4, 5, 6 minutes off of a drive, establishing that running game. And they did so against Florida State. If they can do that with this offense, I think you're going to be feeling really, really good about your chances. So Oklahoma is in an interesting position. Now, here's why I said I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure, Boom. Because Oklahoma looked really good last year in the early portions of the game. And then when they started playing some of the more competitive teams, some of the deficiencies started showing. Now, I do think Oklahoma is much improved from last year. I think that your offense is more sure of itself. Your defense is obviously more sure of itself, and it's playing a higher quality brand of football. But I just don't know who Oklahoma is when they have to go out and answer a big test. Now, I'm not one of those guys that sat here and said, I think that they're on upset alert versus any of these teams. And I'm actually of the mindset that SMU win, really solid win. The Cincy win is a really solid win. But I still don't know where OU ranks in terms of like the top 12 teams, right? And I think that's where I'm at right now. Oklahoma is obviously a much improved football team. They're building towards something. That much cannot be denied. But where they currently sit, it's still a little bit up in the air to me. I don't know how to rank them within the top 13 teams. That's kind of how I'm viewing it right now. You know they're a good team. You know they're an improved team. How good, how improved, we just haven't had the opportunity to see. We'll continue getting more information as every week we continue getting more information. But yeah, that's just the way I look at it. I will put it like this. Boom. If they down Iowa State, they beat Texas, or let's say they lose to Texas in the Red River Shootout, and you win out, if you beat Texas in the Big 12 championship game, who knows, right? The Big 12 is down outside of Texas and Oklahoma. They're clearly, in my opinion, the best two teams. Kansas is a good team. Really excited to see Texas, Kansas this weekend. So I'm not going to say no, Boom, but I would say I still think that it is unlikely. But OU's playing good. OU's playing good. Very good. Am I late? Oh, we already talked about that. Let's see. Big Boy Burger sucks, Ty. I don't know that I've ever had Big Boy Burger. Ty, what do you want to see Miami improve during the bye week? I understand we are undefeated, but sometimes being undefeated can be deceiving. Man, Miami's playing a really good brand of football right now. That Texas A&M game was a lot of fun to watch because Miami was the faster team. They were the more physical team. They were the team that initiated violence, quite frankly. And I thought that was a lot of fun to watch. Miami, they just need to keep improving, Anthony. Like, there's not necessarily one thing. It's everything. It has got to keep moving forward. And if you do that, you're going to be just fine. Hale looked good against Ole Miss. Hale might be out there to take some jobs, Watson. Hale, his release is good. His speed is deceptive, and he is willing. I'm not saying they can be replicated. I'm just saying Jeff would have benefited. Yeah, no doubt. Haven't had this many good coaching staffs at so many programs in a long, long time. 100% Legion. It'll depend on the Texas game. That is the only game that matters in order to show if OU's 100%. Or just a better understanding of playing the position. Prime time, my guy. It's been a while, man. Happy to see you in here. Hope you're enjoying your week. Prime, this is a great question. If it's Stutzman got faster or just a better understanding of playing the position, confidence is a hell of a thing, man. Confidence is a hell of a drug. Seriously. You think about a situation where you saw someone walk into a room confident. They can come into a room, start talking, have that swagger to them. They could convince everybody in that room they know what the hell they're talking about. Turns out they haven't gotten the faintest idea. Confidence is a big thing. I think 1, confidence. 2, it's a year with Schmitty in this new strength and conditioning program. Yes, Schmitty being there last year, I know everybody was like, oh, we're going to look different. It's going to take a little bit of time. And I think you're starting to see that back end of Schmitty being there now. And I think it shows in Stutzman. But I think his confidence and his understanding in the position and what he needs to do is allowing him to play at, quite frankly, a different level right now. He is playing really impressive. Like, even for my Texas fans in here, I just want you to focus on Stutz. Watch an OU game, focus on Stutz. Hell, for my Oklahoma fans in here, how about we do this? How about we make a truce amongst all of us right now? If you're a Texas fan and an Oklahoma fan, 3-hour truce at some point. I want the Texas fans to go watch Oklahoma and key in on Stutz. I want the Oklahoma fans to go watch Texas and to key in on Jalen Ford. Both of you are going to leave the situation saying, damn, that guy can play football. And both of you are going to be 100% right. They're both really fun to watch this year. But I think the answer is 100% both, Prime. I think it's both, 100%. He's recognizing plays faster and he's closing the gap faster. Yes, PJ is that dude in OU competitive depth. PJ is playing really, really well. I said I didn't think it would take long for him to see the field, and I don't think it's going to take long for him to nullify, not nullify, establish his position as the guy. The last few games for the Hurricanes, the defensive scheme that we rely on doesn't emphasize our linebackers to have tackle stats, so Kiko's so low. I'm going to have to watch a Miami game on the All-22. I don't know if I have Miami All-22. Let me check. If I have Miami All-22, then that's what I'll do this afternoon. But I don't know if I have Miami All-22. But yes, I need to check out the defensive scheme. Now, granted, most of the time, your linebackers have a major part of that defense. I do have Miami All-22. And I have your defensive All-22 against Texas A&M. So yeah, I'll check that out this afternoon and dive into it. OU's played 35 different players on defense. Y'all's rotation's been wild. I love the OU is not being talked about as they keep improving each week and staying focused. True. I've been kind of surprised to see them not be talked about as much considering. So yeah, no doubt. That's fine. October 7th will show everybody, no doubt. Boom must have watched Joel Klatt this morning. I'm guessing Joel Klatt had a segment about Oklahoma being a dark horse for the playoffs. And yeah, Joel Klatt, usually great. Really enjoy his stuff. Y'all. Sorry, got a notification that was odd. Texas game will tell everything about OU and Texas both. No doubt. I think Kansas is going to be a lot of fun this weekend. And mainly that's for me. I want to see Texas's defense take on this Kansas offense. And that's mainly an entertainment thing for me because that Texas defensive front is so good. And I just don't think if you're Kansas, you're going to have a lot of fun running into the teeth of that defense. I think they are going to run into the teeth of that defense. So, yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've maintained it. I mean, Chris, it's kind of hard for me to pick a side when Oklahoma hasn't had that game that I can turn to and be like, hey, there's an opponent that's just like shows us who Oklahoma is, right? And I think that's the big thing right now. And we'll see when they play Texas. Then we know they're a good team. How good? I don't think anybody can tell with full confidence right now. I just don't think that like anybody can genuinely say with like full certainty they have a grasp on who the Oklahoma Sooners are because we haven't been given an opportunity for OU to show us who they are. I'm not questioning Texas defense. That front seven is insane and they were good last year. The Texas offense is my question about Texas. They're hot, and they're good, but when they're inconsistent again. Yeah, the Texas offense has been a little bit inconsistent this year, but they are starting to find some consistency in the running game. And just like I said for Oklahoma, just like I said for LSU, you find that consistency in the running game, you're going to have a lot of heat taken off your quarterback, and hopefully that's something we can see. But that Texas defense is wild. It's so good. Who are your top safety duos in college football as of week 4 of the tape you've watched so far? Ooh, that's tough. That's tough. I've seen a lot of good safety play. You know, it's crazy, Anthony. It's not necessarily safeties that are coming to mind for me right now. I'm thinking of some DBs, like some of your nickels, your monies, your, depending on the defensive scheme, right? Is depending on what you call them. I'm thinking of some of those cats, like the Brent Venables Cheetah, like some of those dudes have played great football right now. Really good football. Really, really high quality football. That'd be tough for me to answer. I don't know that I have that off the top of my head. I don't know if I'm going to be honest with you, Anthony. I don't know that I have that answer off the top of my head. I'm trying. I've seen a lot of good play, and I'm just trying to think of like who I've seen that at the safety position in particular is just like Miami. I mean, y'all's got some good safeties over there. That really stood out to me when I watched Miami. Texas has got Jahdae Barron, like I said, at that nickel corner position. And he's playing really good football right now. Terrion Arnold at Alabama, he's playing really good football right now. Even if he gets beat, you look at where he is in phase, he's right there. He's playing really high-level football. Malachi Moore, he's playing really high football right now. There are several DBs for OU just getting turnovers ad nauseum right now. I mean, hell, every time I turn around, it looks like that OU defense has picked off another pass, and I'm sitting there like, well, great. I'm trying to take notes on the front seven, and the back end is over here intercepting a pass. Like, I can't take the notes. Yeah, so that's tough for me to answer. Y'all do have some great safeties, though, no doubt. William says, Texas and OU are similar. It may come down to turnovers, which I believe favors OU. It's going to be a great game, man. It always is a great game. It's a rivalry game. One of the best games in college football every single year, always. I wonder who OU matches up with best out of Washington, Miami, and Florida State. Ooh. That'd be good. That would be really good. I don't know, Boom. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that question right now. I would say maybe Miami. And the reason is a mobile quarterback can be a pain in the side of anybody. And that's not a slouch on Van Dyke. Van Dyke is wheeling and dealing this year. He is on one. Like, he's playing good football. Yeah. Rand, I think he was saying in terms of generating them, where Oklahoma's defense has been able to generate a bunch of turnovers. But in fairness, Jahdae Barron has been a pick machine. Jahdae Barron is out here baiting people. He's playing high-level football. He's one of the guys that stood out to me. But in fairness, like I said, Rand, that Oklahoma secondary, they're generating a lot of turnovers. And I'm fairly certain that's the position William was taking. It's not necessarily that Texas has been blasé with the football or turnover prone, but it's just that Oklahoma defense has been prone to generating the turnover. And Ford, thank you very much. And Ford, good catch. Very good catch. Because that was about to be egregious. Good catch. Thank you very much. 100%. That guy in coverage is so ridiculous, man. That guy in coverage is unreal. I'll tell you, yeah, there's so much good linebacker play this year to watch, guys. If you're a fan of watching linebackers, you're having a hell of a time this year. So, yeah, we got some great games this weekend. Absolutely great games. We'll be back tomorrow, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. You already know the drill. Talking about all the games we didn't get to cover today. Yeah. Going to be fun. Let me hit some more comments, and then we're going to get out of here. OU secondary has been in position, and that's what's allowing them to create turnovers. Yeah, 100%, Legion. Y'all in man coverage have been really good. Zone coverage, still not bad. Your zone coverage has been good. But they've been able to find holes in it. But I also think that that's a result of the times I've seen teams take advantage of OU's zone. It's mainly just like a young player trying to make a play. Like learning experience, right? So I think the OU secondary has played very well. Played very, very well. Barron is a beast. Yes, he is. Let's say OU loses one game and it's Texas, but they beat Texas in the Big 12 championship. Are they in the top 4? Depends on what the rest of the outlook of college football looks like, Prime. But I think there's a very good chance if Oklahoma has one loss and then they avenge that loss to Texas in the Big 12 championship, I think it'd be hard to keep them out, but it would also depend on what that top 4 outside looks like. But conference championship means a lot. Like, that would mean a lot. And you would have a hard time arguing that they wouldn't, because they would have avenged that loss. So you'd have a real hard time keeping OU out the top 4 in that scenario. In that scenario, hey, you would have to have an encyclopedia to give to me to convince me as to why. How do I feel about Alabama? Do you think they make the conference championship? I think they could, Ran, but I'm still not sure yet. Honestly, the same way I feel about Oklahoma right now, where it's like, I don't know exactly who you are. I feel about Alabama, though, a little bit differently. When I look at Oklahoma, the question is, I know you're an improving football team. The question is, how much have you improved? When I look at Alabama, I have no idea who the hell you are right now. Just being honest. Offensively, I have zero idea. Now, if they take that second half against Ole Miss, yes, I think that if they take that second half and grow from it, that's a team that can compete for a conference championship. They can make the conference championship. But I have no idea who Alabama is. So if you're an Oklahoma fan and you're saying, well, like, oh, man, I wonder why Ty doesn't know who we... In fairness, I don't know who my favorite team is. And I'm hard on them. Because what am I supposed to sit here and tell you all? One of the things I pride this situation right here, is that we have honest discussions. Even if you disagree with me, it is my honest opinion, and it is coming from a place of me being genuine. How can I sit here and tell you with any full confidence that the Alabama defense, I will sit here and tell you in full confidence, that Alabama defense is disgusting. That Alabama defense is unreal. It's so good, and they're getting better. That Alabama defense is for real. The Alabama offense, though, how can I sit here in good faith and try and convince any of you I have any idea who they are? I have no idea. I have no idea who they are. Keep winning games will take it for itself 1 week at a time. Ty, do you think the reason why both Dabo and Nick struggle bring in outside help on both sides of the ball when it comes to quarters? No. But I also don't think that we can necessarily say that Nick Saban struggles bringing in outside help. Like in his whole tenure, we might question 4 hires, and that's if we're being like hasty right now. You get what I mean? Like out of his whole tenure, we're questioning 4 hires. And that's if we're being hasty. If we're not being hasty, we're really questioning 2 hires. That's a real good track record. So no, I don't think Nick Saban struggles with bringing in outside help. I don't think that at all. Because this is a guy that had a coaching staff that had how many former head coaches as analysts? And like I said, we can wonder who is the people right now. And like we can question the hire right now. But even if we're being hasty and you're questioning Tommy Rees, which I'm not going to question Steele right now because the Alabama defense is playing really well. So actually, even if you're questioning Tommy Rees and you're saying he's not the guy, you're now looking at 3 hires in the Saban tenure. Those are pretty good odds. For how long he's been there, those are real good odds, man. That's really good that we can look at 3 guys and be like, yeah, maybe not. And 2 of those guys, one of them he won a national championship with, and the other he had a Heisman Trophy produced and lost a national championship, but made it. What defensive line has been most impressive? I can name you several that have stood out to me, Daniel. I can name you several. And who has most improved defensive line? Ooh, good question. Good question. That's a great question. I don't know who I would say has the most improved defensive line. Because there's a lot of teams that I think are playing very well up front right now. I mean, hell, Ole Miss coming into that Alabama game had been able to generate 10 sacks through 3 games, which if we're talking about Ole Miss, that's not something they've been able to do. That was impressive. Also, I mean, I'm not privy to what North Carolina's defensive front has done because I haven't just studied that defensive front. Any North Carolina I've watched, unfortunately, and I'll admit it. I've watched all 22 of their offense. But that defensive line, it got next to no pressures last year, Daniel. And against South Carolina had Spencer Rattler and hell. And if they have maintained that level of pressure from that South Carolina game, which I'm actually going to look up right now, North Carolina would be on the list, Daniel. Oklahoma's defensive front looks improved. I would put Texas's up there with being one of the most impressive. I would put Oklahoma's up there with being some of the most improved. We'll find out for sure how improved against a Texas, but right now, they're playing well. They played well at the early stages last year, but I think it's the competitive depth that really separates this year and last year up front for Oklahoma. PJ Adebayo is going to be an absolute problem. Tough question to answer, but I love the question. Let me check out the North Carolina defensive stats, because if they have kept up the pressure that front seven put on Spencer, that defensive front might be one of the most improved in the nation, because they had nothing last year. I think they had, they got half of the sacks in one game that they had all of last year. I think they had 16 sacks last year or 17 sacks last year. And in one game they had 7 or 8 against South Carolina. Now, granted, that South Carolina offensive line is not very good. Okay. This North Carolina defensive front, they already have 12 sacks on the year. They had 17 last year. I got to put them up there for some of the most improved. That is really nice. That's really nice. There's several different answers to that question, Daniel. I'm going to have to really start keying in, and we'll have a discussion on that. But I think there are several different answers. Like I said, Oklahoma's been in very improved defensive front. Texas's defensive front stands out. The North Carolina defensive front, got to put them at most improved. That Florida State defensive front is stingy, very, very stingy. The Alabama defensive front is finding themselves, though I wouldn't necessarily say as we currently speak that I would put them in either, though if they have a good game this week, I would start putting them up there. And it all relies on Tim Keenan to me. If Tim Keenan is who I think he is, then that Bama defensive front just got a lot better, because he just had a coming out party. And if he has really taken the reins, the Bama defensive front just got dangerous, like really, really dangerous. Great question, Daniel. I love that. Man, that's a good question. See, this is the problem, guys. I say we're about to get out of here, and then y'all are firing off these great questions. Bama's had such a high state. True, Legion. Great one. Were Tennessee and Heupel a flash in the pan last year? Maybe. And actually, boom, I could give you a hug right now. I love you. Because I actually had this game right here, sneaky good game, and it's the Tennessee game this weekend. I think this Tennessee Volunteers game this weekend is going to be one of the sneaky good games of the weekend as they go play South Carolina. I think this is going to be a really good game. Only one team is ranked. I think a lot of people are going to overlook that Tennessee-South Carolina game, but boom, I think that's one we have got to watch. Absolutely is a must to watch that game. And we will learn. But I do think that right now, that Heupel offense looks like it was functioning much better with the quarterback they had last year. Now, maybe that's just because he got it. Good point, Jim. Very, very good point. Reese got an Ian Book to the playoff. Give him time with a new system. Great point. Like I said, he's still learning. Is there a freshman award for the best? Hey, if there is, you guys have got multiple. What do you think about the Weigman being out for A&M? I thought they were in for a good season with him at quarterback. No, I'm not sure your thoughts. So we talked about this earlier. Weigman has got a very high ceiling, really hoping that injury heals up and he is able to get back to the field with zero negative repercussions, because I am excited to see what he can do. This offense was built for Weigman, but Max Johnson has seen SEC play. He's an experienced quarterback. And the one thing I did like about Max Johnson, is he went out there against Auburn and showed them, I will give you my body. Right? Like, pause. He went out there and said, like, I will lay everything on the line for this team. And that can be very positive for the mental aspect of a team. But I'm with you, man. I'm 100% with you, Ran. Personally, I think Weigman, he's got such a high ceiling that it's only a matter of time. Johnson, we know what he is as a quarterback, but the one thing that he does offer that they didn't previously have is that experience. And maybe that will be, in a roundabout way, a positive, getting him in there with that experience, because you have inexperience in some of the other positions in that offense. I don't know. We'll see. Ty, how close do you think the voting would be if the top two Heisman trophy candidates are Caleb Williams and Tyler Van Dyke if they continue performing like this throughout the season? I think it could be close. But I think one thing we need to understand is it would depend how they got there, right? And I know that this gets us into a conversation that, Anthony, you didn't ask, but you got to understand, guys, I came from the legal world, so all of my answers are going to be filled with nuance and context because that's what I feel I have the need to do. If USC's defense is terrible, like awful, and Caleb and them are sitting there, same record, maybe they both have one loss. Let's say in this scenario, Miami and USC both have one loss. Both have won the conference championship. Both quarterbacks are within 300 yards passing of each other, 2 touchdowns. If Miami's defense is good and they get there, it's going to be hard not to give it to Caleb because Caleb will have put so much of that team on his shoulders. So it depends. It certainly depends. But Van Dyke is playing great. I do agree with Hall of Fame, though. And if you've been around this channel for a year, you'll know that I have been screaming from the rooftops about Michael Penix. It was an absolute crime that he wasn't in New York last year. Penix is unreal. He is so good. He is so good. Washington is so much fun. In fact, they are one of the most fun teams you can watch play football, if I'm being honest. And this isn't a new take from me. I said this last year, time and time again, that Washington was my guilty pleasure team. Like, if I'm watching football at night, you can bet your sweet Bippy I'm watching Washington. They are so much fun. I am having a blast watching the Huskies. And I said this the other day. Pac-12 quarterback play is unreal, guys. You want to know what's crazy? Mark, you hit the nail on the head. Scary thing about Penix is he's putting up those numbers in 3 quarters. They're really excited about the quarterback behind him, too. I want to riddle this to all of you. Do you know how wild it is to me that you have Michael Penix, and in the offseason, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, I'm licking my chops. I'm wondering, what am I going to hear about Michael Penix out of Washington? What are they going to be telling how he's wheeling and dealing? I look online, and they're saying, yeah, Michael Penix is Michael Penix. He is unreal. Have you heard about this cat, Austin Mack, true freshman we got out here? He is turning heads. He is unbelievable. When I'm expecting to hear everything about Michael Penix, and they're saying, yeah, Michael Penix is like, we think he's the best quarterback in the nation. We know that, though. We know who Michael Penix is. He is that guy. We feel like he has a guy behind him, too, though, that's going to be very good. That's wild. For a team to have a quarterback like that and still look at the quarterback behind them and say, man, whenever it's your turn, we feel like we are going to keep on keeping on. That's awesome. Cannot wait to see what Washington does. Michael Penix needs to be in New York. He should have been in New York last year. And, yeah. Penix is unbelievable. Corey, I have no idea. I don't know how anybody watched Michael Penix last year and didn't invite him to New York. I thought it was a travesty then. I think it's a travesty now. It's been my biggest complaint with the Heisman ceremony last year is that Michael Penix Jr. wasn't there. I think he's one of the best players. Understand what I just said. I'm not saying I think he's one of the best players in our game. Personal opinion. Personal opinion. Michael Penix is easily one of my top 5 favorite players to watch in college football. Easy. Easy money. Easy money. Love watching him play football, man. That Washington team is so much fun. And I do have a bit of a soft spot for the Washington Huskies, and I'm going to tell you all why, and this will be the last thing before I get out of here, because I've been saying we were done at an hour, and now we're 30 minutes in. With Mac and Arnold getting praised, why isn't Manning? He has. Manning has gotten a lot of praise, man. I talked to some of the Texas people, William, and they were very impressed with where he was. But you also have to remember one of the things that separates the Mac and Arnold situations from the Manning one, and that's Malik Murphy, William. Right? Like the Texas just happened to have a kid in between Quinn and Manning, Malik Murphy. And because of that, I think that's why you're not hearing as much. It's just because of like the delineation of quarterbacks there. But last thing I will say, why I have a soft spot for the Washington Huskies. So many of you know I have a very good friend, Denzel, who ended up going to high school with me, known him since we could walk, basically. We went to high school together. We still talk frequently. He still comes over, watches UFC fights whenever he can. But he ended up going from our high school. He played college football at TCU. He was the starting safety at TCU and ended up being first team All Big 12. Denzel was unreal for TCU. We graduated high school in 2013, so you can find him. If you look up TCU Denzel Johnson, you'll actually find his highlight reel on YouTube. And for some of my Big 12 football fans in here, you'll get flashbacks because you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. If you go back, Denzel Johnson on YouTube, you'll find he's got a highlight from one of the major highlight people. I don't know if it's RS, one of them. Go check it out, though. Dude is a hell of a football player. A lot of people don't know this, but the other team that reached out to him was Washington. Guys, I want to just paint you a picture. Do you want to know how elite the eyes of the TCU coaching staff and the Washington coaching staff were at that time? Understand this, ladies and gentlemen. He played for Gary Patterson, but if he would have gone to Washington, those were those Jimmy Lake Washington defenses where it was PK and Jimmy Lake. PK with the front seven, Jimmy Lake with the back seven. He had some of the smartest defensive minds looking at him. And that was off of 1 year of high school football because our high school coaches did not get his film out there until our senior year. So that's why I have a little bit of a soft spot for Washington. I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for Washington because they were one of the teams that showed love to Denzel, gave him an offer. And he almost went there, but then TCU came last minute, provided that offer. Denzel ended up getting to play for Gary Patterson, which is wild, absolutely wild. And because of that, if I have defensive questions in college football, I asked Denzel because he played safety for Gary Patterson. And then he went on to play safety in the NFL for the Tennessee Titans. And if I'm not mistaken, their safety coach at the time is a guy that will is also just like a wild coach. Like he learned from some of the best coaches. It's just insane. But anyways, guys, we're probably going to leave it there. We've gone over 30 minutes over the hour mark. So, yeah. I still think that it would probably be Caleb. I got a lot of respect for PK, Corey. I got a lot of love for PK. One, I think his defensive philosophy is really cool. But two, like I said, yeah, he showed love. So I got a lot of love for PK. But anyways, guys, we're going to get out of here. We'll see you tomorrow. You already know. We'll be on the Bleacher Report show on Friday making our picks. Until then, hit the like button. Go show some love to the Hall of Football podcast. They do great stuff, as always. If you can't catch Jason over here, you can catch him over on his show, where he is constantly having some of the best guests you can find on the platform. Go give him a follow. Go watch his stuff. Always great stuff over there. Jason, thank you for coming in here, providing some more college football talk in the chat. Love to have you in here, brother. See you very soon. I'll talk to you very soon, Jason. We'll need to get together. Maybe Monday. Get you on here. Do a show, especially after this weekend. OU, Iowa State. That'll be a lot of fun. Kind of do a light preview of the Red River rivalry. So hopefully those shirts come in as well. I really hope those shirts come in. If not, no worries, guys. I'll head to a local place and pick up some Texas gear because I have to keep up my end of the bargain. So it is what it is. Until next time, that's it. See you.